The marble steps of the Supreme Court building gleamed in the morning sun as I adjusted my black robe one final time. In 3 hours, I would be sworn in as the youngest associate justice in modern history. But first, I had to survive breakfast with my family. "So Elena," my father Marcus Thompson said, cutting his pancakes with surgical precision, "when are you going to get a real job? One that actually pays the bills? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss." The irony was suffocating. Here I was, about to take an oath that would make me one of the 9 most powerful legal minds in America, and my own father was still treating me like the family disappointment. My mother, Linda, nodded in agreement while buttering her toast. "Your sister Jessica has her own marketing firm now. She just bought a Tesla. What do you have to show for all those years in school?" I looked across the table at Jessica, who was scrolling through her phone with a smug smile. She didn't even look up when she spoke. "Elena's always been the dreamer in the family, Dad. Some people just aren't cut out for the real world." 27 years of law school, federal clerkships, and appellate court service had led to this moment. In a few hours, the Chief Justice would administer my oath, and every major news network would broadcast my swearing-in ceremony. But sitting in this cramped diner booth in downtown Washington, D.C., listening to my family dismiss my life's work, I felt like that confused teenager all over again. The one they'd always called too intense, too serious, too much. My father raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Here's to Elena, the eternal student. Maybe one day she'll figure out how to make money like normal people." He had no idea that in exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes, his phone would start buzzing with calls from every person he'd ever met. He had no idea that his failure of a daughter was about to become one of the most recognizable faces in America. But before that moment of reckoning, before the world would know my name, I need to tell you how a family's rejection became the fuel for the most unlikely journey to the highest court in the land. I grew up in Millfield, Oregon, a small town where success was measured in concrete terms: the size of your house, the newness of your car, and how quickly you could start making money after high school. My father owned Thompson's Hardware, a family business his grandfather had started. My mother worked part-time at the local bank. They were practical people who believed in practical dreams. Jessica, 3 years older than me, was their golden child from the start. She was everything they understood: outgoing, popular, interested in immediate results. Her bedroom wall was covered with cheerleading photos, homecoming queen sashes, and certificates from the Junior Achievement Program, where she'd won Young Entrepreneur of the Year 3 years running. My room, by contrast, was lined floor to ceiling with books: philosophy, history, political science, legal theory, anything I could get my hands on. While Jessica was at parties or working her part-time job at the mall, I was curled up in the corner chair by my window, lost in Supreme Court decisions and constitutional law cases. My parents saw this as a phase. "Elena's going through her bookworm stage," my mother would tell neighbors with an apologetic smile. "She'll grow out of it." But I never did grow out of it. If anything, my hunger for knowledge intensified. When I was 14, I started watching C-SPAN coverage of Supreme Court oral arguments. While other kids my age were obsessing over pop stars, I was memorizing the voting patterns of justices and analyzing their written opinions. The first major crack in our family foundation happened during my junior year of high school. I had spent months preparing for the state mock trial competition, staying after school every day, researching case law, perfecting my opening statements. Our team made it to the state finals, and I was chosen as lead attorney. The night before the competition, my parents had a choice to make. They could drive 2 hours to Salem to watch me compete, or they could attend Jessica's regional sales presentation for her new job at a cosmetics company. Jessica's presentation was scheduled for the exact same time as my final argument. "Elena, sweetie," my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar tone of gentle dismissal, "you know how important this is for Jessica's career. She's got real potential to make something of herself. Your little debate thing is just, well, it's just for fun, right?" I stood in our kitchen, my meticulously prepared legal briefs in a folder under my arm, and watched my parents choose Jessica's future over mine. Again. "It's not a debate. I said quietly. "It's a mock trial, and I'm the lead attorney." My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Elena, don't be dramatic. There'll be other competitions." But there wouldn't be. This was the state championship. This was my moment to prove that all those hours of study meant something. That I meant something. Jay Chin here. I took the bus to Salem alone. I argued my case in front of 3 real judges, delivered what I knew was the performance of my life, and won. Our team took first place in the state. I was named Outstanding Attorney of the tournament. When I got home that night, clutching my trophy and my certificate, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. On the counter was a note, "Gone to celebrate Jessica's promotion. Leftover pizza in the fridge. Congratulations on your competition. Mom." I sat alone in that kitchen, my state championship trophy reflecting the harsh fluorescent light, and realized something that would shape the rest of my life. If I wanted anyone to believe in me, I would have to start with myself. The second defining moment came during my senior year when college acceptance letters started arriving. I had applied to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, every top university with a strong pre-law program. When the thick envelope from Harvard arrived, I nearly fainted. Full scholarship. Dean's List recognition. Personal note from the admissions committee about my, quote, exceptional academic potential. I burst into the hardware store where my father was working, waving the letter above my head. "Dad, I got into Harvard, full scholarship." He glanced up from the inventory sheet he was checking, his expression more annoyed than impressed. "Harvard? Elena, that's in Massachusetts. What are you going to do there? Study, learn, prepare for law school." He set down his clipboard and looked at me with the kind of pity usually reserved for small children who believe in fairy tales. "Elena, honey, you can't make a living being a professional student. This family needs practical people. Jessica's got the right idea. Stay local, build a business, contribute to the community." "But Dad, this is Harvard. Do you understand what this means?" "I understand that it means 4 years of expensive textbooks and fancy ideas that won't put food on the table." He picked up his clipboard again. "Why don't you go to state like your sister did? Get a business degree. Something useful." I looked around the hardware store, at the shelves of screws and paint cans, at the handwritten price tags, at the small-town life that felt like a prison closing around me. This was their definition of success. This was all they could imagine for me. That night, I called Harvard and accepted their offer. I didn't ask for my parents' permission. I didn't wait for their approval. I packed my bags, bought a plane ticket with money I'd saved from my part-time job at the library, and left Millfield 3 days after graduation. My mother cried when I left, but not tears of pride. They were tears of confusion and disappointment. "You're making a mistake, Elena," she said as I loaded my single suitcase into the taxi. "You're going to end up broke and alone with nothing but a pile of useless degrees." My father didn't even come outside to say goodbye. As the taxi pulled away from our small house on Maple Street, I looked back one last time at the family that had never understood me. I was 18 years old, completely alone and terrified. But I was also free. I had no idea that this moment of complete rejection would become the foundation for the most extraordinary journey of my life. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most give us the greatest gift of all, the absolute necessity of saving ourselves. Harvard was like stepping into another universe. The Gothic buildings, the brilliant professors, the students who spoke casually about changing the world. Everything was exactly what I had dreamed of, and nothing like what I had prepared for. I was a small-town girl surrounded by prep school graduates who spoke fluent French and had summer homes in the Hamptons. They wore their confidence like expensive cologne, while I clutched my second-hand textbooks and tried to pretend I belonged. Belonged. The first semester was brutal. Not academically. I had always excelled at school. It was the isolation that nearly broke me. While my classmates formed study groups and social circles, I ate alone in my dorm room and called home every week, desperate for some connection to family. Those phone calls became exercises in disappointment. My parents' conversations were filled with updates about Jessica's marketing internship, her new apartment, her steady boyfriend who worked at the bank, When they asked about my life, their questions felt obligatory, like items to check off a list. How are your classes? Fine. Making any friends? A few. Still thinking about that law school idea? Yes. The longest conversation we had was when my mother called to tell me that Jessica had gotten engaged. She's marrying Brad Wilson. You remember the Wilson family? They own the car dealership. It's going to be such a beautiful wedding. She wants you to be a bridesmaid, of course. Of course. The family disappointment, invited to stand beside the golden child in a pink dress, smiling for photos that would hang in their perfect house. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving of my sophomore year. I had scraped together money for a plane ticket home, excited to share news about my acceptance into Harvard's pre-law honors program. It was a huge achievement. Only 15 students out of 300 had been selected. I walked into our house carrying my certificate and a detailed explanation of what this meant for my law school applications. The kitchen smelled like turkey and stuffing, and for a moment, I felt that old childhood hope that maybe this time would be different. Jessica was there with Brad, showing off her engagement ring and discussing wedding venues. My parents were hanging on every word, asking about flower arrangements and guest lists. I waited for a pause in the conversation, then cleared my throat. I have some news too, I said, holding up my certificate. I was selected for the pre-law honors program at Harvard. It's incredibly competitive, and it almost guarantees acceptance to top law schools. The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked at the certificate like it was written in a foreign language. My mother's smile faltered. Jessica rolled her eyes. "That's nice, honey," my mother said finally, the same tone she might use to acknowledge a child's finger painting. Now Jessica was just telling us about the catering options for the reception. And just like that, the conversation moved on. My achievement, the thing I had worked so hard for, the validation I desperately needed, was dismissed in favor of discussions about wedding cake flavors. I excused myself and went to my old room. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except for one thing. My bookshelf was empty. Confused, I walked back to the living room. "Mom, where are my books?" She didn't look up from the wedding planning magazine Jessica had brought. "Oh, those old things? I donated them to make room for Jessica's wedding dress storage. You outgrew those years ago." My books. My carefully collected library of philosophy, history, and legal theory. The Marcus Aurelius that had gotten me through my senior year of high school. The constitutional law textbook I bought with my first paycheck. The Supreme Court biography that had inspired me to dream of a legal career. Gone, donated, cleared away like childhood toys that were no longer needed. Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with a crystal clear understanding that cut through years of hope and denial. I would never be their daughter the way Jessica was their daughter. I would never be celebrated, cherished, or understood by these people. And that was okay. I walked to my parents' desk, pulled out a piece of paper, and wrote a letter. Not angry or accusatory, just honest. I explained that I loved them, but that I needed to build a life with people who valued the same things I valued. I told them I would always be their daughter, but I would no longer be their disappointment. I left the letter on the kitchen counter, repacked my suitcase, and called a taxi to take me to the airport. As I waited on the front porch for my ride, my mother came outside. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "Elena, where are you going? You just got here." "I'm going back to school, Mom, back to where I belong. But it's Thanksgiving. Family is supposed to be together." I looked at her, this woman who had raised me but never really seen me, and felt something I had never felt before. Peace. "You are together," I said gently. "You have Jessica and Brad and the wedding planning and the life you understand. I have something different, and that's okay." The taxi arrived as I spoke these words. I hugged my mother goodbye. Not the desperate clinging hug of a child seeking approval, but the calm embrace of an adult who had finally accepted reality. As the car pulled away from Millfield for what I somehow knew would be the last time for many years, I didn't cry. I didn't look back with regret or anger. I looked forward with the kind of clarity that only comes when you stop fighting the truth and start embracing it. While I was going to law school, I was going to become an attorney. And someday, I was going to prove to myself, not to them, but to myself, that a girl from a small town could make it to the very top of the legal profession. The family that had never believed in me had just given me the greatest gift possible, the absolute freedom to become exactly who I was meant to be. Returning to Harvard after that Thanksgiving, I felt like I was breathing clearly for the first time in my life. The weight of constantly seeking my family's approval had been lifted, replaced by something much more powerful, my own determination. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Constitutional law became my specialty, and I devoured every Supreme Court decision dating back to Marbury versus Madison. While other students went to parties or joined social clubs, I haunted the law library, building the foundation for what I hoped would be a career in appellate law. My academic performance was exceptional, but it was lonely. I had acquaintances but no close friends. I studied alone, ate alone, and spent weekends in empty lecture halls, reading cases and writing practice briefs. This isolation might have broken some people, but it forged me into something stronger. Everything changed during my junior year when I enrolled in Professor Margaret Chen's constitutional law seminar. Professor Chen was a legend, former Supreme Court clerk, constitutional scholar, and one of the most demanding professors at Harvard. Her class was notorious for reducing even the most confident students to nervous wrecks. On the first day, she looked around the room of 20 carefully selected students and made an announcement that would change my life. One of you will have the opportunity to work as my research assistant this year. The position requires someone who can think critically, write clearly, and work harder than they ever have before. If you're interested, submit a 10-page analysis of the court's recent decision in Morrison v. United States by next Friday. I spent the entire week crafting that analysis. I read every case cited in the decision, researched the legal history behind each argument, and wrote what I believed was the most comprehensive examination of the ruling's implications. When I submitted it, Professor Chen simply nodded and said, "Thank you, Ms. Thompson." 2 weeks later, she called me to her office. The walls were lined with legal volumes, and her desk was covered with papers covered in precise handwritten notes. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through pretense. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "your analysis of Morrison was exceptional. More importantly, it was original. You didn't just summarize the court's reasoning, you identified weaknesses in their logic and proposed alternative frameworks. That's the kind of thinking that changes law." I felt my heart racing. "Thank you, Professor. I'm offering you the research position, but I need you to understand what you're accepting. I expect perfection. I expect you to work harder than you've ever worked. And I expect you to think like a Supreme Court justice, not a law student. Think like a Supreme Court justice." The words sent electricity through my entire body. Mini. Working for Professor Chen was like a legal boot camp. She assigned me complex research projects that would have challenged practicing attorneys. I analyzed recent circuit court splits, researched obscure constitutional precedents, and helped prepare amicus briefs for cases pending before the Supreme Court. The work was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I was part of something that mattered. Professor Chen treated me not like a student doing busy work, but like a junior colleague contributing to an important legal scholarship. More importantly, she became the mentor I had never had. During our weekly meetings, she would ask about my career goals, challenge my thinking, and share stories from her own journey through the legal profession. "Elena," she said one evening as we worked late in her office, "you have something rare in a student. Intellectual courage. You're not afraid to challenge established thinking. That's what the law needs." "Sometimes I feel like I'm in over my head," I admitted. "Like I don't belong here." She looked up from the brief she was reviewing. "Do you know what imposter syndrome is? The feeling that you don't deserve your success?" "Exactly. And do you know what causes it?" I shook my head. "Being the first. When you're the first person in your family to pursue a particular path, you have no roadmap. No one who can tell you that what you're feeling is normal. But Elena, your instincts are solid. Your work is exceptional. Trust yourself. That conversation planted a seed that would grow throughout the rest of my law school career. Professor Chen didn't just teach me constitutional law, she taught me to trust my own judgment. During my final semester, she called me into her office for what I thought was a routine check-in. Instead, she handed me a formal-looking letter. Elena, I've recommended you for a clerkship with Judge Patricia Rodriguez on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's one of the most prestigious clerkships in the country, and Judge Rodriguez specifically requested my top student. I stared at the letter, barely comprehending what she was saying. A federal appellate clerkship was the kind of opportunity that launched careers. It was the pathway to the Supreme Court, to the kind of legal career I had only dreamed about. Professor, I don't know what to say. Say yes. And Elena? This is just the beginning. Judge Rodriguez clerked for the Supreme Court before becoming a judge. If you excel with her, doors will open that you can't even imagine right now. 6 months later, I was sitting in Judge Rodriguez's chambers in San Francisco, working on cases that would shape federal law. Judge Rodriguez was brilliant, demanding, and absolutely committed to the principle that law should serve justice, not politics. Elena, she told me during my first week, good clerks research the law, great clerks help shape it. I hired you because Professor Chen believes you can be great. Prove her right. Working for Judge Rodriguez was like getting a masterclass in judicial thinking. I drafted portions of opinions that would be cited by courts across the country. I researched complex constitutional questions that had never been fully resolved. I was part of decisions that affected millions of people. More importantly, Judge Rodriguez began preparing me for the next level. During my second year with her, she made an announcement that stopped my heart. Elena, I'm recommending you for a Supreme Court clerkship. Justice Williams is looking for someone with your background and analytical skills. It's time for you to see how the highest court in the land really works. A Supreme Court clerkship, the pinnacle of legal careers. The opportunity that comes to maybe 30 law graduates each year out of thousands of applicants. 3 months later, I was walking through the marble halls of the Supreme Court building for the first time as a clerk. Justice Williams was a constitutional scholar, a brilliant legal mind who had served on the court for 15 years. Working for him meant helping shape decisions that would affect American law for generations. My family, meanwhile, had no idea what any of this meant. During my rare phone calls home, my mother would ask vague questions about my job at the courthouse, as if I were working as a clerk at the local traffic court. When I tried to explain the significance of a Supreme Court clerkship, their eyes would glaze over. "That's nice, honey," my mother would say. "Jessica just opened her second marketing office. She's really making something of herself." I stopped trying to explain. Let them think I was just another government employee filing papers in a courthouse. I was building something they could never understand, creating a career that existed far beyond their small-town definitions of success. After 2 years with Justice Williams, he called me into his chambers for a private conversation. I expected another challenging research assignment. Instead, he offered me something I had never dared to dream about. "Elena, you're one of the finest legal minds I've encountered in my years on this court. Have you ever considered pursuing a judicial appointment yourself?" The question hung in the air between us like a challenge and a promise. A judicial appointment. A pathway to becoming a judge myself, maybe even someday returning to these marble halls as a justice rather than a clerk. "I've dreamed about it," I admitted. "But I'm not sure I have the experience yet." Justice Williams smiled. "Experience can be gained. Judicial temperament, analytical brilliance, intellectual courage. These things can't be taught. You have them. The question is whether you're willing to work for what you want. What would that look like? Take a position with a top law firm. Build a practice in appellate law. Argue cases before federal courts. Establish yourself as one of the premier constitutional attorneys in the country. Then, when the right opportunity comes along, you'll be ready." I left that meeting with a 10-year plan and the kind of focused determination that had carried me from a small town in Oregon to the highest court in America. I had no way of knowing that in exactly 9 years, I would be sitting in this same office, but this time as a nominee for Associate Justice. The little girl whose family had never believed in her was about to become one of the 9 most powerful legal minds in the United States. And the best part? They still had no idea what was coming. After my Supreme Court clerkship, I joined Morrison, Kellner and Associates, one of the most prestigious appellate law firms in Washington, D.C. My specialty was constitutional law, and within 3 years, I was arguing cases before federal appellate courts across the country. My life was exactly what I had dreamed of: intellectually challenging work, cases that mattered, and the respect of colleagues who valued brilliance over family connections. I had built something entirely my own, far from the small-town limitations of my childhood. Then, one rainy Thursday in March, my carefully constructed independence was tested in the most unexpected way. I was in my office preparing for oral arguments in a First Amendment case when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Thompson, your sister is online too. She says it's urgent. Jessica." I hadn't spoken to her in over 2 years, not since a brief, awkward phone call when our grandmother died. I stared at the blinking light on my phone, feeling that familiar knot form in my stomach. "Elena!" Jessica's voice was bright with false cheer. "Oh my God, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you doing?" "I'm fine, Jessica. What do you need?" "What do I need? Can't a sister just call to catch up? I've been thinking about you so much lately. Mom and Dad ask about you all the time." This was a lie. I knew it was a lie because in 5 years of living in Washington, D.C., not one of them had ever called just to check on me. Not on my birthday, not on holidays, not when I'd been featured in legal publications for high-profile cases I'd won. "Jessica, I'm in the middle of preparing for court. If there's something you need to discuss, please just tell me." Her voice shifted, taking on that manipulative edge I remembered from childhood. "Actually, there is something. Elena, I'm in a bit of a situation, and I could really use your help." Here it was, the real reason for the call. My marketing firm has been growing so fast, you wouldn't believe how successful it's become. We're expanding into digital advertising, and I've got this amazing opportunity to land a huge contract with a national retail chain. She paused, waiting for me to congratulate her or ask questions. When I remained silent, she continued. "The thing is, I need a significant investment to take the company to the next level. New equipment, additional staff, a bigger office space. I've been working with investors, but they want to see more collateral." I felt my shoulders tense. I knew exactly where this was going. "Elena, you're so successful now with your legal thing. I was wondering if you could co-sign a business loan. It's just a formality, really. The business is solid, and I'll be paying everything back myself. I just need someone with good credit and a stable income to back me up." The audacity was breathtaking. For years, they had dismissed my career as impractical, my education as a waste of time, my achievements as meaningless. Now that I had built something substantial, they wanted to use my financial stability to fund Jessica's ambitions. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though I already knew I wouldn't agree. "Well, the total loan would be for $300,000, but like I said, it's just a formality. You wouldn't actually be responsible for anything." $300,000. More money than my parents had probably ever seen at one time. And they wanted me to risk my financial future, my perfect credit rating, my financial security on Jessica's business ventures. "Jessica, I need to think about this." "Oh, of course. Take your time. But Elena, there is one thing. Dad's been having some health issues lately. Heart problems, you know. The stress of watching me struggle with this business expansion is really affecting him. Mom says the worry is making his condition worse." Emotional blackmail. She was using our father's health to manipulate me into financial risk. "The doctor says stress is the worst thing for someone with his condition. If I could just get this business secured, it would take such a weight off his shoulders. It would really help his recovery." I felt that old familiar guilt creeping in, the same feeling that had kept me calling home for years despite their complete lack of interest in my life. Maybe the little girl inside me whispered, "If you do this, they'll finally see you as valuable. They'll finally appreciate what you've accomplished. Let me research the business plan and get back to you, I said finally. Oh, Elena, thank you so much. I knew I could count on you. Family takes care of family, right? After I hung up, I sat in my office staring out at the DC skyline, feeling unsettled in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I had worked so hard to build independence from their judgment, but apparently I hadn't built immunity to their manipulation. That evening, I called someone I trusted, my former boss, Judge Rodriguez. I explained the situation without revealing names, framing it as a friend asking for financial advice. Elena, she said, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had seen many young professionals make costly mistakes. Let me ask you something. Has this family member ever supported your career? Ever celebrated your achievements? Ever been there when you needed them? No. Then why do you think they're reaching out now? The answer was obvious, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. They weren't reaching out because they valued me. They were reaching out because they needed something I had. Judge, what if the health situation is real? What if my father is actually sick? Elena, if your father is sick, that's unfortunate. But using his illness to pressure you into financial risk is manipulation, not love. Real family doesn't exploit emergencies for financial gain. That weekend, I decided to do something I had never done before: investigate Jessica's claims about her business. As an appellate attorney, I was skilled at research and fact-checking. Within a few hours of looking into public business records, the truth became clear. Jessica's marketing firm was failing. She had defaulted on 2 previous business loans, had multiple unpaid creditors, and was facing potential bankruptcy. The amazing expansion opportunity was actually a desperate attempt to cover existing debts. She hadn't just lied about the nature of the loan, she had constructed an elaborate fiction about business success to hide financial disaster. If I co-signed that loan, I wouldn't be helping her expand a thriving business. I would be throwing my financial security into a sinking ship. The revelation hurt more than I expected. Not because I was surprised by their willingness to exploit me, but because I was disappointed in myself for even considering it. After all these years of building independence, I had almost let their manipulation pull me back into their dysfunction. I called Jessica the following Monday. I've reviewed your business plan, I said, my voice steady and professional. I won't be co-signing the loan. The change in her tone was immediate and ugly. What do you mean you won't? Elena, this is family. This is Dad's health we're talking about. Jessica, I know about the existing debts. I know about the defaults. I know this isn't about expansion. It's about covering losses. Silence. Then, you investigated me, your own sister? I researched a business proposal, just like any responsible person would do, before risking hundreds of thousands of dollars. You selfish bitch. She spat. Her mask of sisterly affection completely dropped. You sit in your fancy office making your lawyer money, and you can't help your own family when we need you. This conversation is over. Don't you dare hang up on me. Mom, get on the phone. Elena's being impossible. I heard shuffling, then my mother's voice, thick with tears that sounded suspiciously well-timed. Elena, honey, how can you do this to us? Your father is sick, and Jessica is just trying to build something for her family. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. What have any of you ever done to support my career or celebrate my achievements? We raised you. We gave you a home. We loved you. You housed me, I corrected. You fed me and clothed me because that was your legal obligation. But you never supported my dreams, never celebrated my successes, and never treated me as anything other than a disappointment. That's not true. Mom, name one of my achievements that you celebrated. One case I won that you asked about. One milestone in my career that you acknowledged. Silence. I can't help you with this loan because it's not actually help. It's enabling financial irresponsibility. And I won't pretend this is about family loyalty when the only time you contact me is when you need something I have. I hung up and immediately blocked all their numbers. The peace that followed was profound and lasting. They had given me one final gift: absolute clarity about who they were and what our relationship really meant. I would never again confuse their need for my resources with love for my person. I was finally completely free. Kedi tu shapan. What I didn't know was that this freedom would soon become the foundation for the most extraordinary achievement of my life, one that would force them to confront their blindness in the most public way imaginable. 3 years passed in blissful silence. I built my practice, argued landmark cases, and established myself as one of the premier constitutional attorneys in the country. My name appeared regularly in legal publications, and I was frequently invited to speak at law schools and judicial conferences. I had created exactly the life I wanted: intellectually fulfilling work, respect from colleagues who valued expertise over family connections, and complete independence from the toxic dynamics of my childhood. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Ms. Thompson, this is Jonathan Pierce from the White House counsel's office. The president would like to schedule a meeting with you regarding a potential appointment opportunity." A Supreme Court vacancy had opened when Justice Williams announced his retirement. I had heard rumors about potential nominees, but I never imagined I was being considered. At 35, I would be one of the youngest justices ever appointed. The vetting process was intense and thorough. FBI background checks, financial reviews, interviews with dozens of colleagues and former professors. Through it all, I maintained complete secrecy. No one outside the administration knew I was being considered. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in the Oval Office as the president offered me the nomination for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. "Ms. Thompson," he said, "your legal mind, your constitutional expertise, and your judicial temperament make you exactly what this court needs. Will you accept this nomination?" I accepted, of course. But I also requested one specific consideration. I wanted the announcement to be made on a particular date. November 15th. The same day, Jessica had scheduled the grand opening of her new and improved marketing firm. After the financial crisis I had refused to enable, Jessica had apparently found other investors and was making a big show of her business recovery. According to her social media post, she was throwing an elaborate launch party for what she called Thompson Marketing Solutions 2.0. My parents were flying in for the celebration, and she had invited every important person in Millfield to witness her triumphant comeback. The coincidence was too perfect to resist. On the morning of November 15th, Jessica's party was scheduled for 2 p.m. Pacific time. The president's announcement was scheduled for 11 a.m. Eastern, exactly the same moment her celebration would begin. I woke up that morning in my hotel room in Oregon. Yes, Oregon. I had flown back to Portland the night before, ostensibly for a legal conference, but really to be close enough to witness the aftermath of what was about to happen. At exactly 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, the president stepped up to the podium in the Rose Garden. I watched the live stream from my hotel room as he began to speak. "Today I am proud to announce my nomination for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. This nominee represents the very best of American legal scholarship, brilliant, principled, and absolutely committed to constitutional law." Meanwhile, 200 miles south in Millfield, Jessica's party was just beginning. I had arranged for a friend to attend as my representative, armed with a smartphone, and instructions to live stream the event for me. Through her camera, I could see the scene. Jessica in an expensive dress, my parents beaming with pride, local business leaders and city council members gathered to celebrate the Thompson family success story. A large banner read, "Thompson Marketing Solutions 2.0, Building Dreams, Creating Success." The president continued his announcement. "This nominee has argued cases before federal appellate courts across the nation, served as a clerk for both circuit and Supreme Court justices, and has been recognized as one of the most brilliant constitutional minds of this generation." I watched Jessica's party through the live stream. She was giving a speech about family values, hard work, and the importance of staying true to your roots. My parents were nodding proudly, my father holding court with local businessmen about raising successful children. Then the president said the words that would detonate like a bomb in that cheerful gathering. "It is my honor to nominate Elena Catherine Thompson as the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Through the live stream, I watched phones begin buzzing throughout the party. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as people checked news alerts and social media. The jovial conversation began to falter as the reality sank in. Jessica's triumphant smile froze on her face as someone thrust a phone in front of her, showing the breaking news headline: President nominates Elena Thompson to Supreme Court. My father's face was drained of all color. The man who had dismissed my legal thing as impractical was staring at his phone, reading article after article about his daughter's nomination to the highest court in the land. The local newspaper editor, who was covering Jessica's event, suddenly had a much bigger story. He began asking pointed questions. Ms. Thompson, your sister Elena is being nominated for the Supreme Court. Can you comment on your family's reaction? Jessica stammered something about being proud, but her voice was shaky and uncertain. The attention had completely shifted away from her business launch to questions about the Supreme Court nominee she had spent years dismissing as a failure. My mother was crying. Not tears of joy, but tears of shock and confusion. Someone handed her a tablet showing CNN's coverage of the nomination, including my complete biography, Harvard Law Review, federal clerkships, Supreme Court clerk, top appellate attorney. We had no idea, she kept repeating to anyone who would listen. We had no idea she was so important. The most delicious moment came when Channel 8 News arrived to cover what they thought would be a local business story, but instead found themselves interviewing the family of a Supreme Court nominee. The reporter asked my father directly, Mr. Thompson, you must be incredibly proud of your daughter's historic nomination. My father, the man who had called my law degree impractical, stood there speechless for a full 10 seconds before managing, Yes, of course we're proud. We always knew Elena was special. The reporter pressed, What was Elena like growing up? Did you see signs that she would reach these heights? Another long pause. She was always very studious. Through the live stream, I could see guests at Jessica's party huddled around phones, reading about my career achievements. The conversation had completely shifted from Jessica's marketing firm to Elena Thompson, Supreme Court nominee. But the ultimate vindication came 3 hours later when Jessica's business phone started ringing. Potential clients who had been planning to work with Thompson Marketing Solutions were calling to ask if this was the same Thompson family as the Supreme Court nominee. We'd love to work with Justice Thompson's sister's company, one caller said, not realizing he was on speakerphone in a room full of people. That family connection could be very valuable for our brand. Jessica's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, realization, and then something that looked like nausea. She was being celebrated not for her own achievements, but as a footnote to mine, the sister of the Supreme Court nominee. That evening, my phone began buzzing with calls from blocked numbers. I didn't answer them. I knew exactly who was calling and what they wanted to say. Suddenly, after years of silence, they were desperate to reconnect with their successful daughter. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. From my mother, Elena, we're so proud, please call us. From Jessica, I can't believe my little sister is going to be on the Supreme Court. From my father, we need to talk, this is incredible news. For the first time in my relationship with my family, they needed me more than I needed them. They were scrambling to be associated with my success, to claim credit for achievements they had never supported. I blocked their numbers without reading the rest of the messages. 2 weeks later, during my confirmation hearings, a reporter asked me about my family's influence on my legal career. My answer was broadcast live on every major news network. My family taught me the most important lesson of my legal career: that validation must come from within. When the people who should support you don't believe in your dreams, you learn to believe in yourself with absolute conviction. That self-reliance has served me well in every case I've argued and every decision I've had to make. The reporter followed up. Are you saying your family didn't support your legal aspirations? I smiled. Not with bitterness, but with the calm confidence of someone who had long ago made peace with the truth. I'm saying that I learned early in life that the most important person who needs to believe in your potential is you. Everything else is just noise. Back in Millfield, Oregon, my family watched their daughter, the one they had dismissed as impractical and unrealistic, calmly explain to the nation how their rejection had made her stronger. The confirmation vote was unanimous. 3 months later, I was sworn in as the youngest Associate Justice of the Supreme Court in modern history. Tres Richas. They never called again. And for the first time in my life, their silence felt like a gift. 5 years have passed since I took my oath as Associate Justice. The marble halls of the Supreme Court have become my second home, and the weighty responsibility of constitutional interpretation has become the purpose that drives every day of my life. My chambers overlook the Capitol building, and each morning as I prepare for oral arguments or draft opinions that will shape American law for generations, I'm reminded of how far I've traveled from that small town in Oregon, where success was measured by the size of your house and the newness of your car. But the most meaningful part of my story isn't about reaching the pinnacle of the legal profession. It's about what I've built with that platform. 3 years ago, I established the Constitutional Scholars Foundation, a program that provides full scholarships and mentorship to first-generation college students pursuing legal careers. Every year, we select 20 young people from backgrounds similar to mine, kids from small towns, families who don't understand their dreams, environments where academic achievement is seen as impractical or unrealistic. Last month, I had the privilege of meeting this year's scholarship recipients. 20 brilliant young minds from places like rural Montana, inner-city Detroit, and small farming communities in Nebraska. Each one reminded me of myself at 18, hungry for knowledge, desperate for validation, convinced they were fighting the world alone. Justice Thompson, one of them asked during our mentorship dinner, "How did you know you belonged here? How did you get past feeling like an imposter?" I looked at this bright young woman, Maria Santos, from a small town in New Mexico, first in her family to attend college, studying constitutional law at Georgetown, and saw myself 20 years ago. "Maria," I said, "I learned that belonging isn't something other people give you, it's something you claim for yourself. Every day you choose to pursue excellence. Every time you refuse to let others' limitations define your possibilities, you're claiming your right to belong exactly where you are. The real vindication isn't in my family finally acknowledging my success. It's in the letters I receive from young lawyers who tell me my story gave them permission to pursue their dreams despite family disapproval. It's in the constitutional decisions I've authored that protect the rights of people who have been dismissed or overlooked. It's in watching Maria Santos and dozens of others like her build careers that seemed impossible from where they started." 6 months ago, something unexpected happened. I was in my chambers reviewing briefs when my assistant informed me that someone was here to see me. I wasn't expecting any appointments, but she said the visitor claimed to be my sister. Jessica was waiting in the reception area, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. She wore an expensive dress that didn't quite hide the uncertainty in her eyes. "Elena," she said when I appeared, "thank you for seeing me." I led her to a small conference room, curious but cautious. We sat across from each other at a polished table, the weight of years and choices between us. "I know I have no right to be here," she began, her voice lacking the confident tone I remembered from childhood. "I know we haven't spoken since everything happened, but I needed to tell you something." I waited. "My daughter starts college next year. She wants to be a lawyer." Jessica's voice cracked slightly. "She's brilliant, Elena. Top of her class, debate team captain, everything you were. And when she talks about her dreams, about wanting to argue cases, and maybe someday become a judge." Jessica paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "I hear Mom's voice in my head. I hear myself starting to say the things we said to you. About being practical, about choosing something safer, about not reaching too high." She looked directly at me for the first time since she'd arrived. "I realized I was about to do to my daughter what we did to you." The admission hung in the air between us. "I've been watching your career from a distance," she continued. "Reading about your cases, your decisions, your foundation. I've been so proud of you, Elena, and so ashamed of how we treated you. We were wrong. We were so completely, devastatingly wrong. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or vindication, but sadness. Sadness for the years we had lost, for the family we might have been, for the wounds that had shaped all of us." "Jessica," I said finally, "I appreciate you telling me this, but I need you to understand something. I didn't become successful to prove you wrong. I became successful because I learned to prove myself right." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know. And that's what I want for my daughter. I want her to know that someone in her family believes in her dreams, no matter how big or impossible they seem. We talked for another hour. Not about reconciliation. Too much had happened for that. But about understanding, about breaking cycles, about ensuring that the next generation would grow up with support, instead of skepticism. As she prepared to leave, Jessica asked one final question. Elena, would you be willing to meet my daughter sometime? To talk to her about what's possible? I thought about Maria Santos and all the other young scholars in my foundation. I thought about the responsibility that comes with breaking barriers, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Yes, I said. I'd be honored to meet her. 6 weeks later, I had lunch with my 17-year-old niece, Sarah. She was everything Jessica had described: brilliant, passionate about justice, and hungry for a career in constitutional law. As we talked about her college plans and her dreams of attending law school, I saw the same fire in her eyes that had driven me through all those lonely years of building myself from scratch. Aunt Elena, she said as our meal was ending, thank you for showing me what's possible. Mom told me about what happened when you were growing up, about how the family didn't understand your dreams. I just want you to know that your story is the reason I believe I can do this. That evening, I sat in my chambers as the sun set over Washington, D.C., thinking about legacy and redemption and the strange ways that pain can transform into purpose. I never got the family that understood my dreams from the beginning, but I had built something better. A life that proved those dreams were worth pursuing, a career that opened doors for others, and now, finally, a family member who would grow up knowing that extraordinary goals deserve extraordinary support. The little girl who was told her books were worthless and her ambitions impractical had become a Supreme Court justice. But more importantly, she had become someone who ensured that other little girls would never have to choose between family approval and their own potential. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't changing the people who doubted you. It's building a world where doubt gives way to possibility, where support replaces skepticism, and where the next generation inherits belief instead of barriers. I am Justice Elena Thompson, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. But the title I'm most proud of isn't the one that appears before my name. It's the one that appears in the scholarship letters I sign each year. Mentor, friend, and believer in dreams. The family that said I failed gave me the greatest gift possible. The unshakable knowledge that the only opinion of my worth that truly matters is my own. And that knowledge has been worth more than all the validation they never gave me. If you're fighting for dreams that others don't understand, if you're building something that your family can't see, if you're the first person in your world to reach for something extraordinary, know this: your worth isn't determined by their ability to see it. Your potential isn't limited by their imagination. And your success will speak louder than their doubts ever could. The path is difficult, but it's yours. And sometimes, being the first means being alone until you prove that the impossible was just waiting for someone brave enough to make it real. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.